Podcast here in Penn State Sports Night. I am Logan Bourandas, hosting for the first time what feels like forever, but I am joined alongside Chris Lemmo. And there's a lot of baseball storylines to talk about. But Chris, how you doing today?
Doing all right, excited to talk some baseball here. It's been a tough weekend for my Phils, but at least the Orioles had a huge day today, breaking the A's win streak at 13. So excited about that, even if my Phillies look like garbage.
Yeah, I mean it's been a rough weekend for the Mets. Also got swept by the Cubs, since our last podcast, but they did end up winning their series against the Nationals. They clinched that one today. Had a big shutout with Taijuan Walker on the mound, so we were able to rebound there. Still first in the National League East, by the way, with a impressive 9-8 record. But looking around the MLB, there were some interesting storylines to look at. So, Chris, I'm going to start out with you. What was something that really stood out to you over this past weekend?
Well, I have to say the biggest, or not biggest, but coolest storyline for me was that Bo Bichette hit that home run. I think it was at Fenway Park that landed right in front of the location that his parents met at. Which, I mean, that's pretty cool. I mean, you talk about something that like you couldn't write a better storyline. Like the fact that that actually happened is crazy. It actually, okay, it was at Fenway Park, and it was actually at, I think it was a gym right outside of Fenway Park, and I guess that's where it landed. But really, absolutely crazy that that happened. But yeah, I think that was one of the coolest storylines I've heard in quite some time.
Yeah, no, I briefly heard about it when it happened, and it's just crazy just because the odds of that really happening. I mean, Bo Bichette, he has to be in the right spot, right time, and the ball has to go in the right spot as well. And especially since it's like out of the stadium, like towards a gym, like the odds of that are just really insane. Like, I mean, just to hit a home run is impressive enough, but just to hit it like where his parents met, like that's crazy. And I think something that just happened like literally a couple hours ago was that Madison Bumgarner no hitter, or really a fake no hitter, as it's being called. I mean, so what happened was Madison Bumgarner, the pitcher for the Arizona Diamondbacks, he threw a no hitter, but it was a 7 inning game. It was a shortened game since it was the second game of a doubleheader. So I think now what fans of MLB are left to decide is it really a no hitter? I mean, I am one to say that it is a fake no hitter. There's still 2 innings left to be played for it to be called a no hitter, in my opinion. But Chris, where do you stand on that?
Yeah, no, I think it's a fake no hitter too. I mean, actually, I'm going to coin the phrase here, going to trademark it right now. Instead of a no hitter, it's a faux hitter. It's a fake no hitter. I look, I mean, all the time you see these things get broken up in the eighth or ninth inning. So, to go 7 innings, no hit, there's been a lot of people that have done that, but the hardest part is finishing that off in the eighth and ninth. So in my mind, no, it doesn't count. And there's guys like I know Aaron Nola threw his first complete game shutout the other day, and when asked about it, he was saying that he's done that, I believe, in a 7 inning game before, but he didn't feel like it was legit either. So even a lot of the players don't really feel like it's legit. I mean, not to take anything away from Mad Bum. I mean, obviously that's a great start. I mean, but as far as should that go in the history books as a no hitter, I think there's no question it shouldn't. It's it's the same thing. I mean, like if you throw like a 7 inning perfect game, I mean, it's very impressive, but probably shouldn't be going in the history books.
Yeah, and Madison Bumgarner, not to take away from his accomplishment, he's having a rough season to this point. So the fact that he was able to get that no hitter is definitely huge for him. But 7 innings, 7 strikeouts, and if you were to kind of predict if he would have finished off those 2 innings, he was already at 98 pitches, so he was already normally at that area where pitchers would normally be taken out. So I don't really have too high hopes that Madison Bumgarner would have completed that no hitter. And I mean, there are cases all the time. You kind of said it where these no hitters get broken up in the eighth inning and really late into the ninth inning as well, and those don't get credited as a no hitter. So I think that it really isn't. It's not a no hitter. I just think it's not a no hitter. And I mean, I don't know how Madison Bumgarner feels about it because it'll go down as a no hitter just because he did finish out that game. And I think the other thing that kind of should be brought up from that is that the Braves played a doubleheader today against these Diamondbacks. They can only get one hit in those 14 innings. They got one hit in game one of the doubleheader. Then obviously Madison Bumgarner shut them down in the next game. So the Diamondbacks is really handing it to the Braves, who a lot of people thought would be the runaway favorites of the NL East.
Yeah, I mean the Braves. I'm not really sure. Well, I know there are issues with the bats, but it's kind of amazing. I mean, like you wouldn't expect Ozuna, Albies, Darno, Swanson to all be hitting under 200, and it's not like we're 1 week into the season anymore. I mean, we're getting close to what they've played now over 20 games. They've played 21 games now. So, I mean, we're 3 weeks into the season. You would expect at some point these guys to turn the corner, but they haven't at all. I mean, even Freddie Freeman is only hitting 205, and I don't know when the last time Freddie Freeman hit 205 was for a month. I mean, the dude just rakes. I mean, it's unbelievable to see him hitting near the Mendoza line this far into the year. And I know he has 5 homers, and that's impressive as is, but I'm not sure what the issue is there. The entire team has really gone slumping outside of Acuna, but they're going to have to figure something out. Now, luckily for them, the rest of the division has been complete garbage. The NL East is basically the baseball equivalent of the NFC East in football last year, where nobody actually wants to win the division. I mean, through the first 3 weeks, the only team with a positive run differential is the Marlins at +1, and they're not above 500. Only the New York Mets are above 500 at what are they 9-8. So it's the Braves are kind of lucky in a sense that they've gotten cold as literally the entire division has. But at some point, the Mets won't stay around 500 forever. I would assume that the Phillies might not, although I have no idea. That team confuses me. But at some point, the Braves will have to start winning games, or else they will fall far behind in the division.
Yeah, and that division, the NL East right now, the Mets, they would be in third in almost every other division in the MLB, and that's kind of the same thing that we saw in the National League East. Not the National League East, the NL no, the NFC East in the NFL. So I mean, it's just kind of an interesting division where no one really seems to want to win right now. I mean, both the Mets and the Nationals kind of been hit by COVID. The Nationals more so than the Mets because the Mets they were supposed to play the Nationals, but these teams just they're all capable of winning the division, or at least we think 4 out of 5 of them are. But none of them can really string off a few wins together. I mean, looking at the Braves, I thought they're going to win this division by far. And looking at their team, everyone aside from Ronald Acuna just forgot how to play baseball. I mean, that's just basically what it is here. And last year, it was everyone kind of carrying Acuna to the first place spot in the NL East, and then Acuna picked things up towards the end. So maybe we'll see the rest of that Braves lineup pick things up because I don't think all of them hit under 200 for long. They're definitely all capable players, especially Freddie Freeman, Marcell Ozuna, because both of them were ranked pretty highly in the MVP race, with Freeman actually winning. And I was high on the Phillies after the first couple weeks too, just because they looked like they could compete with the Mets. They beat the Mets a couple times earlier on in the season, but they've kind of lost a couple games in a row as well. Although I will credit Bryce Harper because he kind of won me my fantasy league today with his performance, just hitting home runs. So this NL East is probably the most confusing division all of baseball right now. And all five teams, they're separated by 2 games, which is the closest division in all of baseball.
Yeah, well, the Phillies are they're an enigma. I cannot figure out that team. They there are times that that lineup looks so complete and just they look like a legitimate contender. And then there's other times that they look like my high school baseball team. And I mean, one of the bigger issues is I'm I'm gonna say I'm not that high on Joe Girardi. I think it's going to sound disrespectful considering I know a lot of people think he's one of the best managers of all time, but I think what he did with the Yankees is because of how much talent. I mean, that team had future Hall of Famers on, multiple future Hall of Famers on it. And, I think while it's impressive that Yankees teams or those Yankees teams did what they did with Girardi, at the helm there, I don't know how much credit can be given to him. I mean, in my mind, he has not done the greatest job managing this team so far. I mean, I don't think he's gotten the most out of the talent, and it seems like every bullpen move he's made has been wrong, misusing guys in the wrong situations. Like I know today he used David Hale in a high leverage situation with the bases loaded to Trevor Story. And I said, oh, look, here comes a grand slam. And sure enough, yeah, Trevor Story hit a grand slam. So I haven't gotten a lot of his moves. Obviously, I don't think he's the biggest problem, but it's a difficult team to figure out. But yeah, a lot of those teams are in that division. I mean, you look at the Nationals, and it's a similar thing there in that they do have big names in that lineup, like Josh Bell and Kyle Schwarber, despite them actually not being that good, are pretty big names. I mean, you think of two big power hitters, and none of them can hit this year. And then you think of like Victor Robles. He's another guy, big name, young guy that everybody thinks is, one of the top up and coming players in the league. He's underperformed. So they're all around the NL East. It's not just the Phillies, it's kind of everywhere that, teams have just underperformed. And, a lot of the individual, I guess, so-called stars on these teams have too.
Yeah, and kind of going off that Girardi point there. I mean, last year you can say that the bullpen wasn't necessarily his fault. That was one of the worst bullpens we've seen in recent memory. But this year, they actually addressed the bullpen in the offseason. They got guys like Archie Bradley, Jose Alvarado, but they're still below 500 just slightly. They're still not where they need to be. So the blame, or at least some of it, should go on Girardi. I mean, he was a highly touted manager when he was brought in. I know the Mets wanted him, or at least I wanted him. I don't know if the Mets wanted him, but they should have gotten him. So I mean, we'll see how the NL East kind of transpires over the next couple of weeks. Moving into the NL Central, it's a pretty close division also with the Brewers at the forefront, but also teams like the Cardinals, Cubs, and surprisingly the Pirates all in that race as well. And then you the Cincinnati Reds having lost 7 straight after they went off and had a great start. They were 9-5, I believe, to start out that year, and then they've just kind of collapsed right now. They're fifth place in the NL Central. But Chris, what are you making of this division right here?
Well, I look like a complete moron throwing money on last Monday. I guess that was the Nationals I was throwing. Well, yeah, I threw the money for the Nationals, but I did invest big time in the Reds, and that doesn't look great. Yeah, they've lost 7 in a row. It's funny. Again, they have the talent, but this team seems to have this weird thing where they all either get hot at the same time or cold at the same time. Unlike like whenever I watch the Phillies, it seems like the lineup is never hot together. There's always like 3 or 4 guys in the lineup that are hot and 3 guys that are like ice cold. The Reds, it's like either the entire team is hitting or nobody's hitting, and like there's no in between. And right now they're going through that phase where nobody's hitting, just like they did last year. Do I think that they'll finish below 500? No, but obviously it does show that there's a big variance in this team, that they don't have any consistent guys in that lineup. What they do have is a lot of boom or bust guys that when they're on, they have one of the best lineups in the league, but they're not on a lot of the time. As far as the rest of the division, I was actually going to say the Cubs were back, and then they kind of didn't really have that great of a series against Milwaukee. So they played well against the Mets. They had that series. They put up a lot of runs on the board, and I kind of thought, okay, maybe the bats are coming to life, but that wasn't really to be. I still feel good about my St. Louis pick, but Milwaukee's pitching is unreal. I mean, I I don't know that anybody really thought that highly of that rotation coming in. Maybe I'm wrong, but Woodruff and Burns and Freddie Peralta have looked like as good of a trio of starting pitchers as anybody in the league, in my mind. I mean, I think you could put what Corbin Burns has done there with not walking like anybody up against anybody in the league. He's pitched 24 innings to a .37 ERA. I mean, there's not anybody that's better than that right now. I mean, he's in DeGrom territory, which DeGrom is one of the best pitchers I have seen right now. So it's really impressive what the Brewers are doing. My question is, do you think that they can keep it up?
I think they definitely have the potential to do it. I mean, their rotation was always probably the biggest problem in Milwaukee, and this was especially true when they had their biggest opportunity to compete during the MVP Christian Yelich year. They never really addressed the rotation, but now Corbin Burns has kind of carried that rotation to being one of the top ones in baseball. And then obviously you have Josh Hader in the bullpen. So I definitely think even if they make a move at the deadline, I think they're definitely going to be competitive with the Cardinals for the entire year. I mean, looking at the rest of this division here, you bought on the Reds. I sold on the Reds in that same segment, and I do not feel like more of a genius right now for doing that because I think the big concern for me was the rotation, but I didn't expect the offense to go this cold this soon. I mean, we saw it all of last season, but I thought they actually figured it out. And they just kind of went silent right away. And even with this 7 game losing streak, they still have a plus they still have a plus 11 run differential on the season, which is kind of crazy. But overall, this Reds team, they've definitely fallen apart as of late. I mean, the Cubs, you kind of mentioned they got hot over the Mets series. I wasn't really too high on that just because the Mets kind of shot themselves in the foot all series long. They had a bunch of errors that were kind of forced on themselves. Francisco Lindor looked terrible in the field as shortstop during the entire series. So I get the Cubs swept the Mets, but I couldn't really get too much hope off of that sweep for the Cubs. I mean, they're still kind of mediocre in my mind. I still think that the Brewers and the Cardinals are still a step above, and I think that I'm still okay with keeping the Cardinals at the top of the NL Central just because I still like their offense a little bit better. But I wouldn't be surprised if the Brewers were to compete with the Cardinals for the rest of the year.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, the only thing is the offense is just really not that great for the Brewers. Now, it hasn't had to be because the pitching's been so good, but at some point, I mean, I have to think that the rotation won't. I mean, I think they'll still have one of the top rotations in the game. There's no way that they're going to keep throwing like a 2.20 team rotation ERA. I just don't think that's possible. And I don't think, Corbin Burns having a .37 ERA is possible. So at some point, I think the offense will need to get going. I mean, their average right now is 209. They're 27th in the league overall in team batting average. So at some point, they're going to have to hit better because the pitching won't be there forever to pick them up. But I do think that they're going to compete with the Cardinals just because of the nature of that division. It is a weaker division. And of course, Yelich should come back. It sounds like there was no structural damage I just saw on his MRI today, but he's still on the disabled list. I don't think they have a timetable for him. He'll be an interesting one when he comes back because him and Bellinger are actually both hurt right now. And if you ask me two guys that needed to have big years, it was Yelich and Bellinger because they were both kind of hailed as, the big superstars of the league now, having that commercial, what was it, back in 2019 where they're hitting home runs everywhere. And they had that bad shortened season last year and now, are banged up and off to a slow start this year. So you kind of got to wonder about them a bit. But I do think that once Yelich gets back, if he's hitting, that'll help the offense tick a bit, and that'll keep them trending in the right direction.
Yeah, and then moving into that Bellinger division in the NL West, probably one of the more exciting divisions in all of baseball. We'll talk about the big rivalry in a second with the Dodgers and the Padres, but the Giants have actually made a big push, and they're at second place right now, 14-8. And then you have the Diamondbacks, who just got those two wins in the doubleheader today. They now are 11-11. And the Rockies 8-13 in last place. But all five teams having a positive run differential at the start of this season. But the big story, of course, with the Dodgers Padres rivalry. And this has been a fun one to watch at the start of the season. They've played two separate series so far. And the second one had the major highlight of Fernando Tatis Jr. hitting a home run off Trevor Bauer, kind of covering his one eye there as he rounded first base. But Chris, this has been a fun rivalry to watch throughout the year.
Yeah, it really has. I think in my mind, I guess we'll talk about it now since we're here, but I think it's the best rivalry in baseball right now. And look, I mean, if you want to talk best rivalries, I they just have that. They not that they have the hatred, because there's a difference between the hatred and being good at the same time. Like the Reds are a walking bench clear. I mean, it seems like every single series they play with the Pirates, it's like if somebody looks at you the wrong way, the bench is clear. Like I don't really get what's wrong with the NL Central, but like I wish there was a stat that somebody kept of like the bench clearings, because I swear every single time the bench is clear, it's one of the Reds, Pirates, or it's usually both of them at the same time. But neither of those teams have been good. So obviously, in my mind, to have a good rivalry, you need that hatred, but you also need to be good at the same time. And these are two of the best. Well, should I mean the Padres haven't had a great start, but two of the best teams in the league. So in my mind, every time you're getting an possible NLCS preview out there that these two teams face off. And it only helps that they're so close together, and you get, a lot of visiting fans in both of the ballparks. So I think it's a great rivalry. I mean, you got LA fans that are kind of in the middle of possibly building a dynasty. I mean, I think they're right now, they look like one of the best teams created on paper. And if they win more rings, it will be a dynasty. And then the up and coming, San Diego Padres, who again look like they're, I wouldn't say building a dynasty or anything because they haven't really showed it yet, but are building a sustainable winner that is going to be good for a very long time. So it's going to be really fun to watch for future years. These two teams face off, and I'm sure now that the Padres are good, at the same time as the Dodgers, that animosity will get there. You'll see at some point, Tatis or somebody will get hit by a pitch, and it'll, be one of those big things that blows up. But until then, just to have these two teams good at the same time, it is a legitimately good rivalry.
Yeah, I think there's no question this is the best upcoming rivalry in probably all of sports here. And I think we kind of saw it at the start of this season where all the tools are there. They're two teams in the same division. They're both good. They're both in the same state. I mean, Los Angeles, San Diego, both in California. And when these two teams played last, you had the perfect storylines. The Dodgers and Padres both had their top pitchers on the mound. Fernando Tatis came off the IL. And then in the second series, Fernando Tatis went off. And him and Trevor Bauer, two of the most exciting players in all of baseball, one on each separate side, they both had their own moment where Tatis homered off Bauer, covered his eye around first base, and he had a great game in that game as well. And Trevor Bauer, he was actually happy he did that. He wanted to see that happen in baseball. He wanted to see that excitement. I think that as these two teams play, as they play more series throughout the year, I think it's going to get more and more exciting, and it's going to lead to some great baseball. And especially as the Padres get better, as because remember they're still a young team, they're still going to get better. I feel like it's going to get even better for years to come. But I know that they're probably the best rivalry right now. But Chris, if you're talking about a second place in terms of rivalries right now, who would you even think about there?
That's a tough one. I guess I would go. Hmm. There's a lot of the NL Central teams, not that any of them are that good. There's a lot of animosity in the NL Central for some reason. Cubs Brewers has been a good one. I know with Wilson Contreras has gotten hit a lot by the Brewers pitching staff, and he's kind of taken exception to that. Um, and I know between the fan bases there, again, it's another close proximity thing. Both teams have been good, fairly good the last couple seasons. That's been a good one. Yeah, as much as I'd like to say Phillies Mets over the years has been a really good one. I think because the Phillies have kind of, well, they haven't been good in like a decade. I think that kind of has taken some of the edge off of that one. So I guess in my mind, I got to go with Cubs Brewers, although A's Astros is a really good one in my mind also. A lot of animosity there, and not only that, but the storylines, because you've got one, the whole Astros cheating scandal, and they're, I guess, kind of seen as like another version of the Yankees, evil empire because of that. And then, of course, there's the A's who are, always going to be known as the Moneyball team, the team that beats you with like a $40 million payroll. And there also is a lot of animosity there, despite not being that close. They've had bench clearings before, so I might actually have to say A's Astros.
Yeah, I think that was one that I was kind of thinking about as well, just because, especially for recency, like they've both been good for a long time and they both played in the playoffs against each other recently. So that's one I was thinking of. And I think in terms of even last year, you can say Yankees Rays. I mean, they played in the playoffs last year against each other, and they're the two teams that are always competitive in the AL East. And it's kind of the same scenario as that A's Astros series. I mean, the Yankees are always an evil empire. They're gonna be the team that beats you with a big budget. They're the team that have always the best players. They go after the best players. But the Rays, they're kind of that poverty franchise where they have good players, but they always manage to trade them in their primes. They always have to manage. They always manage to have a top farm system. They always have great guys coming in. They're young, and they just manage to build great teams off that. And the Rays actually beat the Evil Empire last year, so there's that level to it as well. So it's not like the Astros beating on the A's all the time. It's kind of a back and forth rivalry. So I feel like that would be a good one. I mean, in terms of last year's playoffs, especially with what happened and their division rivals, you can go with the Braves and Marlins, just because they had a little bit of back and forth instances between them and just in that series when they played in the NLDS last year. But I think if I were to look at a second place, I'd probably go with the Yankees, Rays, or I would go with what you said in the Astros and in the Astros and the A's.
Yeah, I agree with that. Now, if you're going to go historical rivalries, I think you got to go. Um, well, yeah, obviously you got to go Yankees Red Sox at number one. Although I think one that's really underrated is Dodgers Giants, and that's been around for a long time. Obviously, going back to their New York roots, and they've both been good at the same time a lot lately. I mean, the Giants, in my mind, are one of the best run teams in baseball, and actually have the Dodgers old. I believe he's the president or was the president in LA as their GM now, and I think he's doing a great job out in San Fran. But that rivalry has gotten very heated in the early 2010s, back when the Giants kind of had that run of three World Series. And the Dodgers were still good then. I mean, the Dodgers have been good for decades now. So I think those are probably my two best historical rivalries. Phillies Mets obviously is a very good historical one as well. I'd put that in my top five. Um, yeah, those are really the three that jump out to me first. Would be Yankees, Red Sox, Dodgers, Giants, and Phillies, Mets.
Yeah, and those are all really good ones. And I think that the Yankees Red Sox, that's right up there, number one. But I think the National League version of that no one really talks about too much, gotta be Cardinals Cubs. And I mean, just because they play so close to each other, it got really heated, especially during that home run steroid era where the Cardinals had Mark McGwire, the Cubs had Sammy Sosa during that home run race, kind of revived baseball in the late 1990s. And it kind of got reheated in the middle of the 2010s, where the Cardinals, they were towards the end of their World Series dominance, and the Cubs were just beginning it. And they played in the playoffs a couple times. They obviously matched up in the division, the NL Central, year after year. So it's another division rivalry where both teams and both fan bases kind of hate each other. I mean, there was literally just an ESPN documentary about that home run race and about how much those fans hate each other. Where like Cardinals fans hate Cubs fans. It's a big city in Chicago versus a small baseball town in St. Louis. So that's probably the big one that jumps out to me, and it's one that I think should at least be in the top five.
Yeah, you're right with that. I shouldn't have forgotten about that. Cubs Cards is a good one. That 30 for 30, by the way, Long Gone Summer was really good. But that, yeah, St. Louis is really like, when if you look up baseball town in the dictionary, I mean, they are a baseball town, like 100%. I mean, they have some of the most passionate fans there. I mean, they fill up that stadium every single game, it feels like. And again, St. Louis is not that big of a city, compared to a city like Chicago, New York, Boston, LA. So it is impressive what they're able to do out there. But that's definitely in my top five as one of the best rivalries in the game. It hasn't been as heated lately, I think, but it's always one of the better historical ones for sure. I do want to quickly go back to the NL West though, because you did talk about them a bit, but the San Francisco Giants are off to a phenomenal start. And I think, at least for me, I mean, I kind of wrote them off before the season, but they look legitimately good with a lineup that shouldn't be that good. I mean, all of their starters outside of Austin Slater are over 30 years old. I mean, Buster Posey's 34, Crawford's 34, Longoria's 35. I mean, they're very old, that team, but they're still good. So, I mean, what do you think is really driving them so far?
I mean, it's an interesting case. I mean, the Giants, they're definitely an older roster, definitely should be rebuilding, but I don't think we can count out that last year they were about a game away from making the playoffs in a shortened season. And I'm not sure how much credit you want to give this man, but Gabe Kapler might be a reason why. I mean, he's really kind of managed his team well. I mean, he wasn't really a great fit in Philly. I mean, you saw it firsthand, but he might be the perfect guy to lead this Giants program, and one that shouldn't be where they are right now, especially looking at their roster, just the age of their roster. But he's really finding a way to get the most out of all of his players. And I mean, we talked about some of the guys over the age of 30, guys like Longoria, Brandon Belt, Buster Posey, guys like that. And their pitching staff isn't really that great as well. I mean, they have guys like Kevin Gausman kind of at the forefront of that pitching staff. He's 30 years old as well, and they still have Johnny Cueto too. So there's not really too much that should get these Giants fans excited. But Gabe Kapler has to be doing something right, especially when you're in a division with teams like the Dodgers and the Padres, and you're right there in second place.
Yeah, I mean, they they look legitimately good. Very surprising to me, but I mean, Buster Posey has kind of had a renaissance season. Same with Evan Longoria. He looks really good. Mike Yastrzemski had a slow start, but he's turning it on now. So that lineup, like, it doesn't look imposing, but they just seem to always get the clutch hit. I mean, like, when they came into Philly, that it felt like every single time, the Phillies had a lead, the Giants just had that, fighting back mentality that it's easy to say that you need to have that kind of fighting mentality, but it's not easy to have. And they have it. I mean, they are a team that can very easily come back and win ball games. And it's kind of amazing what they're doing right now. And I think it's mostly the rotation that's doing the damage. In terms of hitting, they're actually, in terms of average, not hitting the ball all that well. I believe they're 26th in the league with a 215 average, but they're hitting the long ball really well. They're tied for fourth in the league with 28 homers. So that's kind of what's been helping them out. They're scoring by the long ball, but the rotation has been awesome. And Kevin Gosman has been legitimately a stud. I mean, I watched that game the other night against the Phils, and his off speed stuff is filthy. I mean, his fastball is pretty good. It sits around 94, 95, but his off speed stuff is legitimately good. And I think that's kind of what's helped push him to the next level. He was always, okay in Baltimore. I think that because of where he was picked, fourth overall, the Orioles had high expectations for him, and he was kind of more of a middle of the rotation guy in Baltimore than a front end guy. But ever since leaving Baltimore and coming to San Francisco, he looks like a legitimately good number two or even number one starter.
Yeah, I mean, this Giants team's been exciting to watch. You mentioned players to leave from Baltimore. Let's talk about that AL East for a second there. With the Orioles, they're tied in last place with the New York Yankees, who have improved to a record of 9-12, but still not enough to leave the AL East cellar just yet. But the Boston Red Sox still currently in first place with a 14-9 record. Then you have the Rays and Blue Jays kind of either at 500 or a game away from reaching that mark. But Chris, what have you seen right now from this AL East?
I'm still not buying in on the Red Sox. I I don't really like I still don't like that pitching staff. I mean, nothing's really changed in my mind. I mean, I guess the pitching staff has been a bit better than I expected, but I also don't know if that's, short sample size talking or what. I mean, the lineup was always going to be good. I mean, JD Martinez can hit. Rafael Devers can hit. Xander Bogarts very good as well. I mean, that was never the problem. I mean, Verdugo is showing what he can do now. The lineup was always going to be very deep and very good. For me, the question was always the pitching. And right now, I think they're getting some contributions. Like Nick Pavetta's throwing to a 3.48 ERA. And maybe it's because I still remember his time with the Phillies and I've been scarred from the breakout Nick Pavetta seasons that were supposed to happen like the last 3 years. I'm still not buying into him being a solid, number three starting pitcher. I mean, maybe he finally broke out and people just can't pitch in Philly, which is possible. But I think that he's kind of playing a bit over his head right now. Also, looking at the walks to strikeouts, he's thrown 14 walks to 18 strikeouts. That's not really where you want to see that ratio at. Now, Nate Eovaldi and Rodriguez have looked really good so far. I mean, Eduardo Rodriguez has always been pretty good, so I do buy into that. Nate Eovaldi, I'm not 100% sure on. He's kind of been very up and down since coming over to the Red Sox, but that rotation is going to be the big question mark for me because if they can continue to actually pitch like this, then maybe they'll be able to hold on to it. But I'm a little bit worried that it's going to be once again that it's Eduardo Rodriguez and then four other guys who you never know what you're going to get, like it was last year. Now, the rest of that division, the Blue Jays we haven't seen with Springer, although it sounds like he's ready to come back on Tuesday from what I'm hearing. So that'll be exciting for them. I believe they're going to be playing the Nationals on Tuesday, facing off against Max Scherzer. But the Blue Jays haven't quite played as well as I expected them to just yet. I think they'll turn the corner once they get Springer back in. Bigger problem there is also the rotation. Steven Matz has looked good, but now Hyunjin Ryu is hurt. They got a bunch of other pitchers that are hurt. Nate Pearson, their top prospect, is hurt. Ross Stripling's hurt. So I'm not really sure what they're going to do for the rotation. And I was worried about that to begin the year. And now without Ryu, I'm even more worried. So that's going to be a problem. As a whole, I think the AL East just looks a bit weaker than I thought going in.
Yeah, I mean, at the beginning of the year, like you could have made a case for three, maybe four teams to potentially make the playoffs. But right now, only the Red Sox have kind of looked like a playoff team thus far. And I'm still very concerned about their pitching staff. Like you said, I mean, that lineup, they have guys who can hit. despite them trading away guys like Andrew Benintendi during the trade deadline. I'm not the trade deadline during the offseason, but that's actually proved to be a solid move because he's struggling in Kansas City. But this Red Sox pitching rotation, maybe once they get Chris Sale back, things can be more consistent. He might come back in like the May, June area. But right now, Eduardo Rodriguez is doing pretty well so far. But other than that, there's not really too much to get excited about in Boston. And maybe Brandon Conroy can kind of tell us differently. I know he's been a guest on this show for quite some time, but or not quite some time, just that one episode. But I mean, looking at the rest of this division, I mean, the Yankees, they're starting to kind of make that push out of the cellar. I mean, they kind of destroyed the Indians today when we're recording this. The offense is starting to pick things up. And maybe when they get Luke Voigt back, that can get better. But their pitching staff has also got some question marks to it as well. And I can't wait to see George Springer get back with the Blue Jays. I mean, I'm very interested to see just how he plays in this Toronto lineup. He's going to provide some veteran leadership to a very young roster, and just with the way they're playing right now, just hovering over that 500 mark, they're 10 and 11 right now. I think that Springer can provide an extra boost to that lineup there. And with the Rays, they're just around 500 right now, trying to figure things out. So that division, I don't really think anyone's kind of gotten a handle on it just yet. And the Red Sox kind of cooled off thus far. They're 5-5 in their last 10. So I wouldn't really say that they're the strong favorites right now moving forward, especially since they're only 2.5 games up in that division. And then I think moving into the NL Central here, the Kansas City Royals, they're still in first place in that division, 13-7 record. The White Sox right on their tail. And I think a team that's struggling here that I didn't really see coming, the Minnesota Twins. Right now, they're currently in fourth place with a 7-13 record right now. And this is right after they made the playoffs last year. And they even got better in the offseason as well. They signed, I believe it was Andrelton Simmons to boost that lineup. But Chris, what are you getting? What are you reading into the NL Central?
Yeah, the Twins, I'm not really quite sure what their issue is. They're another weird team that should be doing a lot better. I mean, you look at a guy like Byron Buxton, he's having a breakout year there, the center fielder. I mean, he's already at 6 homers on the year. His career high in the season is 16. So, and he's hitting 392. And again, career high in batting average is 262. So he's more known for his defense, but I mean, to be breaking out like this offensively is huge. I mean, considering that lineup is often regarded as one of the better lineups in baseball, but right now the rest of the lineup isn't playing well. It's kind of been Byron Buxton, Nelson Cruz, and then that's about it. They haven't found anybody else to really contribute. Now, Miguel Sano is a big part of that lineup, and he's hurt right now. Andrelton Simmons is on the COVID IL. Kepler is also on the COVID IL. So they do have a good amount of guys missing. So I think that's part of the problem, and it's actually forced Alex Kirilloff, who is one of their top prospect, one of the top 20 prospects in the game, to start now in left field. But they're going to need more contribution up and down the lineup. It just hasn't really been there. And surprisingly, it's not like they haven't been hitting. It's been more the power aspect of it, which is interesting. That, I mean, normally they're kind of a good power hitting team. So that it is a little bit surprising there. Oh, look, I don't see them finishing as one of the worst teams in the division. I do think they'll turn it around, but it is going to be, tough to compete with the White Sox if the rest of this team isn't hitting and the pitching is as mediocre as it's looked so far, especially on the bullpen side of things. Now, a team that's really impressed me is the Royals. The Royals have looked surprisingly good. I did not expect this from them. Now, a key part for them has been that rotation has been pretty decent. Brady Singer has looked good. Danny Duffy has looked really good all of a sudden. So they've had some contributions from the end of the rotation, and the lineup with Carlos Santana and Whit Merrifield has been good. Whit Merrifield, in my opinion, is one of the more underrated players in all of baseball. I love that he's that utility guy that can do anything, and he just rakes. I mean, he's again like a like a David Fletcher kind of guy. He can hit. That was my obligatory David Fletcher reference for the podcast. Although I'm sure when we get to the AL West, he'll come up again. But look, I mean, he can hit around 300. Is going to give you 10 to 15 homers a year, and play anywhere on the field. I am taking that on my team every single day.
But would you take that on like your if you had a set an MLB lineup, like you take Whit Merrifield, or is that David Fletcher's spot?
That's a tough one. Um, I think mostly because I think David Fletcher is a bit more athletic and he's younger. I got to go with my boy D Fletch, but it's a close one. They're along the same lines of the same player there. That's Look, David Fletcher is basically who I wanted Scott Kingery to be. And unfortunately for the Phillies, he's like the Dollar Tree version of David Fletcher, but David Fletcher is, again, I'm taking him on my team 10 times out of 10. Love that guy.
We're really gonna have to get you that David Fletcher jersey. I mean, I feel like that's just like a must at this point. We're kind of like building this up for you to get that jersey of David Fletcher. But I think just looking at this division with the Royals, I mean, Whit Merrifield, he has been carrying their offense. Michael A. Taylor has played a big part in it as well. He kind of leads that team in batting average right now. And the big thing in that Royals team is Danny Duffy. And you kind of said it, he leads that rotation. He leads the AL in ERA right now. He's got a .39 ERA. I don't think that's too sustainable, especially since Danny Duffy, he is 32 right now, 32 years of age. He hasn't really been a guy known for Cy Young numbers. He's a career 4 ERA to this point. So I don't think it's going to be too sustainable. I mean, looking at the rest of this division, the White Sox, I wouldn't say they've impressed me because I expected this from them, but they're right where I thought they would be. I thought they would be winning the division. So I'm not surprised to see them at 12-9 right now, especially with one of their best young hitters, Eloy Jimenez, out for quite some time. That did not surprise me. But what did surprise me is this Twins team. I thought they would be right with the White Sox, and I thought it would be a two-team division with the Twins and the White Sox, but the Twins' power has just failed them. And normally they're known for being one of the best power teams in the MLB, but as of right now, it's really just been Nelson Cruz, and that's just about it. Nelson Cruz and Byron Buxton, and then no one else has more than 3 home runs on this Twins team, which is definitely a scary sign. And hopefully they decide to pick it up. You mentioned they some guys injured right now, so we'll see just how they kind of recover there. And then the last part of the around the MLB part of this podcast here, take a look at the AL West here. The Oakland A's, I owe them a little bit of an apology because I bashed them on a segment 2 weeks ago where I think they were 3-7. I called them out, and since then they have gone to go 14-8. They have won 11 straight games since I said that. They just lost their winning streak today, but they're first in the division right now. The Mariners are actually in second place in that division right now. They with a 13-9 record. Then you have the Angels and Astros both kind of around that 500 mark. The Angels at 500 and the Astros 1 game below it. But Chris, what have you seen in this division?
I Okay, I'm probably gonna have to issue an apology to the Athletics too. I don't get why they're good. Like I look at that lineup and I I don't know. I mean, I don't I don't feel like they should be that good. Again, they have like Jed Lowry, who is ancient, and I'm not gonna lie, completely forgot was a New York Met last year until I looked at his stat line. Is hitting 296 with 3 homers. I don't think he's going to keep doing that. I mean, he hasn't done that since 2013 in Oakland, and maybe Oakland has the special, I don't know, sauce for these guys, but I I don't think he's going to be able to keep hitting this well. Matt Olson's been another guy that's kind of broken out this year, and we've always known that he's had a lot of power. I mean, he had a 36 homer year back in 2019. The big thing there is he's hitting 338 instead of like, 260, 250. So he's kind of broken out, but the rest of that lineup isn't that good, especially with Matt Chapman not really hitting that well at all right now. But I'm just surprised. Like they have like 4 or 5 good hitters on that team, but the rest of that lineup, like Elvis Andrus, is somehow only 32, and I'm pretty sure is like 50 at this point. He was on those Texas Rangers teams that lost the World Series. But I don't know. I mean, they Elvis Andrus, Seth Brown, Sean Murphy can hit, although he's not hitting right now. Mitch Moreland's another guy that's old and kind of eh. So it is surprising to me that they're this good. And then the rotation has Cole Irvin pitching well. Cole Irvin sucks. Like, I'm sorry, but he's not good. I promise that Oakland didn't fix him so that he's a sub 4 ERA pitcher. There's just no there's just no way. I mean, I know his fastball ticked up to like a little over 91 now, and there are pitchers that can be successful with the fastball sitting around 90, 91, but it's hard nowadays. And his other stuff isn't good enough to be able to do that. So I don't think the rotation is that good either. Again, it's going to sound weird coming off of a 13-game win streak, but I I don't know. I just have to see more of this team before buying in, I guess. I'm sure I'll be issuing an apology in a couple weeks, though, for sure. And then to go to the Angels, they're a team that I kind of has kind of cooled off a bit after their hot start. Mike Trout is a bit banged up right now, so that's kind of one of the big reasons why. But they are getting some contributions from their pitching staff. Shohei Ohtani has looked good. He's looked good all over the field, pitching and hitting. He's hitting 292 with 6 homers. I mean, right now, I think he's outside of Trout, he's definitely the best player on that team and is living up to the hype that I kind of died down, after he had that whole arm injury and couldn't pitch. He now is living up to that hype, I think, for sure. And then Dylan Bundy and Andrew Haney are good, but again, they really lack an ace. What I was thinking is if if Scherzer is really on the market as this is his last season in Washington, if he's really going to be on the market, then the Angels should go all in and trade for him at the deadline because they need an ace. I know it's just for one season, but that might lower the asking price. I would go all in and do that if I were them at the deadline. But the real news out of Anaheim is that my man David Fletcher back to hitting again. I was worried about him. He was struggling at the dish, but had a couple big RBIs yesterday. He's going to be well on his way to hitting 300 again. I'm not worried about him at all. He's the GOAT. I mean, again, I can't wait to go to an Angels game just to get his autograph. Most people are going to be going for the Mike Trout autograph. I'm going to be going for the David Fletcher autograph. Can't wait there. But when he's hitting, it's just a better lineup. And of course, once Trout is back, like I said, he's a bit banged up. And once Rendon is back, I think they'll kind of turn on the Jets again offensively.
Yeah, and that would be interesting. First, to see you go to an Angels game and get a David Fletcher autograph, hopefully with the David Fletcher jersey. But second, to see Max Scherzer joining Anthony Rendon in Anaheim, I feel like that'd be interesting, especially with the Angels kind of hovering around that 500 area. They have needed a pitcher throughout this entire decade. So getting an ace in Max Scherzer, we don't know for how long, but just getting an ace for right now, I feel like that'd be a great move for them. I think the big thing in that division is the A's. I mean, we talked about their winning streak, and it's really interesting that they had that winning streak, and yet they still have a negative run differential, which kind of shows that their offense didn't really play as great as they should have. And looking at their leaders, you talk about Jed Lowry. I've seen him in New York for 2 years, or maybe I haven't seen him just because he hasn't really played that much. And you have Matt Olson, who you expect to have the performance he's having right now, hitting 319 so far in the season. And then other than that, you have just a bunch of nobodies. I mean, Ramon Laureano's hitting 227, Elvis Andrus and Matt Chapman. They're both not really hitting where they should right now. The only three players hitting above 350 that are regular players are Matt Olson, Jed Lowry, and then you have Mark Canna for the A's as well. So the lineup is definitely questionable for me, and I think that going down the road, I definitely trust the Astros down the road more, just because they have guys who can do, or you have guys that can hit consistently. I mean, they've had some injuries with Bregman and Jordan Alvarez, and they've kind of come back as well. So I expect them to kind of pick up the pace down the road. The Mariners surprised me as well, just because they're 13-9 right now. They're right there with the A's right now, but they always have those early season starts where they kind of fizzle out late in the season. So I expect the Mariners to be out of that race in a couple of weeks. But yeah, that AL West definitely an interesting division to watch. And then the final segment we have, just kind of a question to wrap things up. We did one of those last week, and of course, since then, Patrick Corbin has given up a another loss. He lost to the Mets today, but this question, I think we both have baseball games to go to, MLB games planned for the summer. But Chris, who is the best MLB player you've seen play in person?
This is a tough one. I mean, I've seen. I still got to go. I think with Roy Halladay in person as probably one of the best players I've seen all time. Um, I mean, of course, I'm going to be impartial to some of those Phillies teams. I think I've seen Scherzer pitch, and I mean he's pretty dominant. I've never gotten to see Mike Trout play. That's definitely on the bucket list. Trying to think who else. I mean, obviously I've seen Harper play. I've seen Soto play. So I mean, of course he's one of the best players in the game right now. But in terms of like a guy that's like a Hall of Fame level, I mean, it's definitely got to be Roy Halladay. I haven't seen DeGrom pitch. Someday I'd love to see him pitch. But other than that, I can't think of any huge names that have stuck out. Like I've seen a lot of like very good players, but I haven't seen a lot of guys that jump off the page to me as like definitely going to be a Hall of Famer.
Yeah, and I think the thing with me is that I have this curse where when I see star players play, they just don't do well. I have seen Mike Trout play when the Mets played the Angels. He didn't really hit. Didn't get. I don't think he got a hit in that series. John Carlos Stanton, I saw him play when he was in Miami. He had a hat trick and strikeouts, so that's out. And then I had, I think the only, I mean, so I mean, looking at the Mets pitchers, I mean, you can probably say you've seen a lot of them, but when I've seen Noah Syndergaard once, he left the game with an injury. I saw Jacob DeGrom pitch back in I think 2016 when they played the Yankees. That was when the Mets started their season out with like an 11 game winning streak. And then I just so happened to see the game where DeGrom gets shelled by the Yankees and the Mets lose the winning streak in the game. But the one goat that I've actually seen play a consistent game, really good game, one of the best performances I've ever seen, is Wilmer Flores, and he actually got a 6-hit game against the Chicago Cubs when I saw him play. I mean, it was a while ago, but it was back when Wilmer Flores was still a New York Met. I saw him in City Field. I think I was sitting in right field, but Wilmer Flores, I think he went 6 for 6 in this one particular game. So I think in terms of all time performances, that's probably the best one I've seen. I mean, I've seen some legends play. I've seen guys like David Wright play back towards the end of his prime, guys like that, but none of them have put up a great performance like the amazing Wilmer Flores.
Yeah, in terms of individual performances instead of career, I mean, I saw the JD Martinez 3 homer game a couple weeks ago against Baltimore. And I mean, I'd never seen a 3 homer game in my life. So I mean, that was pretty incredible to see. I mean, other than that though, yeah, I mean, not a lot of Hall of Fame level. Like again, Mike Trout is on the bucket list to see, but not a lot of like Hall of Fame level guys. I'd love to see DeGrom. Would love to see Trout. Definitely David Fletcher, of course. He's in that same discussion as those other two guys, of course. But yeah, I mean, definitely looking forward to hopefully checking some more players off the bucket list to see this summer.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of hoping for the same thing here. I mean, especially with the young stars in the game that we haven't really got a chance to see. Like especially as we get to see like Acuna, Soto, Tatis, who just hit another home run in LA, by the way. See guys like that get to play. I feel like that should be more exciting. But it'll be interesting to see if any of them kind of get to the Wilmer Flores level where he hit 6 for 6. And he had 2 home runs in that game as well. It was I think a win over the Cubs. But it should be interesting to see as we get to go to games over the summer, what guys we get to cross off the bucket list. And with that, that is going to wrap up this edition of Top Prospects here on Penn State Sports Night. For Chris Lemmo, I'm Logan Bourandas, and have a great day.
Thank you for watching this edition of Penn State Sports Night. If you're a fan of our content, please be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more clips. Also, follow us on Twitter at PSSN TV and on Instagram at PSU Sports Night to keep up with all the action. For all my colleagues, we are Penn State Sports Night.